talking about what makes you successful in life, relationships, and business. It's Jump, Pivot, and Roll with Shannon Stiles and Rachel Murphy.
Welcome to Jump, Pivot, and Roll. Last week, we had a great conversation about where to start, how to start. And today, what we wanted to do was we wanted to bring on a dear friend who has been down this journey, and she's actually done a lot of the things that you are looking at possibly doing. So she's been very successful at it. We really look up to her. And please welcome to Jump, Pivot, and Roll, Linda Barbour.
Welcome, Linda.
Hello. Thank you for having me on. This is exciting.
Well, it's exciting to have you here.
We are so excited to have you here with us and to hear about your journey.
So I have a question for you. In the very beginning, when did you have that aha moment? What was your aha moment?
In the very beginning, I think I had a couple of them, but the one that really comes more recently was about 3 years ago. I had just recovered from PTSD, but in that process, I had survived the challenges, and then my health took a turn. And so, I had come to the end of that, but that process of PTSD, I was losing my home, I had no money. I mean, things were really, really bad. And I stood at the end of my bed. I remember this. I remember it so clearly that I remember what I was wearing. And I just said, I deserve better than this. It wasn't that I can do better, because I feel like in the past I didn't do everything right, obviously, but I did good things. It's just that my life was falling down around me. And that was my aha moment. And I went to the left side of my bed. I sat down, grabbed my journal, and I wrote 4 pages. I got in vision and I wrote 4 pages. And ladies, if you were over top of my shoulder, you would have said to me, stop writing, let's just go get you some food, but, and it was just that moment. And that's when I just started stepping in, and it's amazing. And I teach clients this all the time. And it's amazing what had happened 8 months later. It didn't happen overnight, but 8 months later, pretty much what was on that list was manifested.
That's amazing. So can you take us kind of to who you are so that our listeners understand who we're actually listening to? Who is Linda Barbour?
Well, who I am today is a life and business coach. I help many of the, unfulfilled midlifers that, have had successes in life, have had great blessings in life, family, children, had the career, had the car, had the house, maybe even got the divorce, right? Like they've had the outside things that are such blessings, aside from the divorce, of course, but they've had these outside blessings. But there's still that, like, you walk in the door and you say, this is it. This is it for all the sacrificing. And it's like, I don't feel fulfilled. Like, I feel grateful. I should be grateful, but I don't feel fulfilled. So, I walk people through to really tap into their inner being and start living from the inside out. Start this process of living from the inside out, because that's really where the true joy is. So,
amen to that.
Yeah. And, but where I started was, I was a financial advisor for 21 years. I was a single mom. I raised my son since he was 4 years old. We had a lot of turbulent times. Our, case, the divorce was really the easy part. The challenging part was keeping my son and myself, healthy and safe. And we were in the court system, or I was in the court system for over 10 years. And our case went from family to Supreme all the way to the appellate division. And this is not a brag, but the blessing in that, because it was a really, really challenging years, the blessing is that our case is used throughout the United States to hopefully help many other families and that are currently in what our situation was. So what I use today is not only my professional experience, but I use my personal experience and my journey and how I overcame a lot of obstacles. And even in spite, going back to the court days, it wasn't about winning. It was about stepping forward every day and listening to my instincts, listening to my heart, doing what I felt was the best thing for me and my son, regardless if judges and attorneys, and even though that they wanted what I wanted for myself, they said it couldn't be done. The law was the law, and I just did not settle with that. So it was a battle. But in the end, today, it's really great to be able to take that journey and be able to make an impact in other people's lives. It really gives purpose to it. And it's very healing. It's very healing for someone. And I always encourage people that we can't change the past. But what if we can turn it around and create a blessing for someone else? And it's not only healing for them, it's healing for ourselves as well.
That's amazing. What a journey.
I know your past story, and I know the court story and all of that. And for some reason, when I think of you, the quote, "If you stand for nothing, you fall for everything," comes to mind. Because you didn't allow that to make you a victim. You didn't allow that to be something bad in your life. You actually stood up for you and your son, and you changed potentially millions of people's lives.
Exactly.
I commend you for that.
Ripple effect of throwing one stone in the pond, and you see that first little ripple, and it just goes on and on. It's amazing, Linda, that you did that, because how much easier did you just make it for somebody else who has to face that?
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. I hope I've done that. I know I've been able to do that in the work that I do today. But you just mentioned it cut out on my end. I don't know if it's cutting out on your end, but what I heard you say is like choosing to be a victor, and that's what it is.
Yes.
Victim or victor. You only have two options, and both of them are a choice. And it can be really crappy because, trust me, what I've gone through, people have gone through much harder things. But the thing is that it still becomes a choice. Where is the power? The power is when we're in victim mode. That is not where our power is. Our power is choosing to be a victor. And the healing part of that is taking the experiences and turning them around for a greater good, turning those around, So being a victor is a choice. It's certainly a choice. I agree.
And I always look back and I look at the hardest times in my life, and those were the door opening towards the biggest blessings that I've ever had. So I agree with you 100% on that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you look at...
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, it's just cutting out, and I wasn't sure if that was, and I didn't hear you. I apologize.
So when you look at the journey that you have traveled, because the one thing I want to make sure that our listeners understand is it doesn't happen overnight. Like you said, it was 8 months later, which is amazing in itself. But where were those little wins along the way? What were they that propelled you forward? Was it reading a good book? Was it a mentor? Like, what gave you that strength, besides, of course, being a mother bear and protecting your child? What gave you that strength to keep going when the hard got hard?
In the years where I was raising my child, who is now 24, by the way, so, but those years of raising him and going through, trying to juggle, create some normalcy, single parent role where you're doing everything 24/7, having a professional.
You're cutting out on us.
So-called part. will, as, preparing for court all the time. So my strength, I had God in my life, but didn't have a strong relationship, as strong of a relationship as I have today, and I really wish I did. I did get on my knees often. I lost my dad. He was young, so I called out to him a lot, and I just trusted myself, because what happens is when you're in adversity, especially when it was something that you feel strong about, and it's not like I had the resources. I didn't have the external resources. I didn't have all the money. I didn't have a lot of time. I didn't have a lot of support in the sense of, attorneys and so forth, because I didn't have a lot of money, to do that. I was spending an enormous amount of money, but still I had to do on my own. And it's just, looking back, it is the grace of God, but it's also just really having grit and trusting that inner talk, that inner voice that's saying, keep going, despite everything that's telling you not to. I just trusted myself, because here's the thing, in that particular situation, it wasn't about winning, because every day that I fought, my son struggled. He thought I was trying to take him from his dad. So I was losing on that end. And then I had a really high chance that my son would not be the man that he is today. So I wasn't winning in either case very, very well. So it was certainly a challenge. And then, in later years with other adversity, it's my relationship did get stronger with God, and that was great. And then, but again, it goes back to that inner voice, just trusting that, whether you call it the Holy Spirit or whether it's just you just saying, hey, I'm going to believe in myself. I'm going to bet on me right now. And, so after having my diagnosis of PTSD, 3 years ago when I recovered, I literally had a process each and every day. And I took those 4 pages, I broke them out like the 5 balls of life, right? So if it was financial, physical, health, career, and I just took 2 steps. It seems like such a tall mountain, but I just took 2 or 3 steps. What's in my power today that I can do to step into that?
And I think that's so important that right there is such an important thing, is that we realize it doesn't have to be climbing the mountain overnight. It's just taking one baby step in front of the next baby step.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I did. And like I said, if you were over my shoulder, you would have said, Linda, let's let's go get you some food, But the thing is, I just took 2 or 3 steps a day and said, what's on? And I read it every single day, and I wrote those down, and I looked at my activity so that when I got up in the morning, first of all, it got me out of bed. You can imagine, like when you're in those dark times, and you're losing everything, or your health is compromised, or you're fearful. Like I was scared so many times in my life, and, for our safety, especially, I crawled across floors and, checking on my son at night. It was kind of a little crazy. It was a little crazy. But, when I was at that point, when I said, I deserve better than this, I said, what's in my power? 2 to 3 steps a day. And then what happens is you start focusing on what's working in your life, even if it's only a little bit. But most of the time, there's a lot that's working in your life, even through adversity. There's a lot. And when you focus on that, you attract more of it, because your energy is heightened and people are brought into your life to help support what your vision is. So I just stayed with it. And like I said, 8 months later, I did end up selling my house. I didn't lose my house, thankfully. I did sell it. I moved across country. My house looks very much like the house that I wrote in the journal that day. I described my position. So it's just wild how things can happen when you focus on the right thing, even through adversity.
So when you finally realized what you were called to do, could you look back and see how everything that happened for you prior to that was to prepare you for that moment?
Absolutely. I say this all the time. People say, well, why aren't you mad? Like, you should be so mad. Like, so much was taken from you. And I said, no. I said, everything I've gone through, from fighting for my life 15 minutes at a time after the birth of my child. I went through severe postpartum depression and literally fought for my life 15 minutes at a time for about 6 months. It was a long time. I really believe that I'm a miracle. It has nothing to do with me. It's because that, my life has purpose, because if it was up to me, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here.
Really
the pain was
point.
so hard. The pain was so hard.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. One of the things I want to talk to you about real quick, Linda, is what I keep hearing you say as you're telling us our journey and as you're walking us through your steps. Self-care and routines and vision was vital to your success. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes, I could have done a better job on self-care during that time, a much better job, because what I was trying to do, and it's something that, I work with my clients on now too, is that I was trying to live this normal life. So I would say, yes, I'll make the carrot cake. Yes, I'll bring this. I'll do this. I was still doing the yesing while trying to hold these extra loads, So what I should have done looking back, and what I do today, is I put that oxygen mask on myself first. So I thought I was pouring into others, but in reality I was only pouring a little bit in a lot of different places, which was exhausting me more so than ever. And I became resentful. I was just really depleted, where today I can still pour into others and I feel totally energized. I feel fulfilled. I feel
it sounds
satisfied.
It sounds like you are actually deciding what to say yes to, and you've learned it's okay to say no so that you can give your best when you say yes.
Absolutely. That's exactly it.
Exactly it. You're listening to Jump, Pivot, and Roll. We're going to take a short break so you can hear a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back in just a moment. Don't go anywhere because it's not going to take long.
The Jump, Pivot, and Roll podcast is brought to you in part by the Shannon Styles Allstate Insurance Agency. Just as you take that next step in life, you need to take that next step in protecting yourself, your car, your home, and your family. Reach out to Shannon at 316-773-9864 or shoot her an email at sstyles@allstate.com. Also by Simplify My Life ICT. Is your life cluttered? Do you need help with organization? Rachel Murphy can help. Check out Rachel's services online at simplifymylifeict.com or reach out to Rachel at simplifymylifeict@gmail.com. To keep up with the Jump, Pivot, and Roll podcast, make sure to follow them on their Facebook page. Just go to facebook.com/Jump, Pivot, and Roll. There you can find content, podcasts of the show, discussions with Rachel and Shannon, and more. Plus, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on any of your favorite podcasting sites, from iTunes and Spotify, Google Play to TuneIn, and right on their Podbean site at jumppivotandroll.podbean.com. And for all the exclusive content, make sure to become a VIP member on their Patreon site. Just go to patreon.com/Jump, Pivot, and Roll.
And welcome back to Jump, Pivot, and Roll. You're listening to Rachel Murphy, Shannon Styles, and our special guest today is Linda Barbour. Linda, thank you again so much for coming on and sharing your journey with us. It's so important, I think, to hear how people start in their journey, because more importantly, I think it's the struggles that they had to face, because so many times we look at people that are successful and we think, oh, well, maybe they had money, or they were born into it, or they just got lucky, or
made it happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But 9 times out of 10, that's not the case. Those people usually don't keep their wealth. What would you say in the beginning was the most crucial quality that you possessed in order to make you successful?
Wow, and it does go back. My parents did the very best that they could. My mom was 17 when she got married to my dad. She had a child at 17, 18, and 19. And then another one who I call Oops, which I love him to pieces. He was born 4 years later. So, she had her hands full. And, they were both, my dad worked in a steel mill. So they did the very best that they could. We went from the projects to a single family home, but we were really on our own in many ways. And that was a blessing. I remember at 12 years old, getting in trouble at school because I didn't have sneakers for gym. I had to figure out how I was going to get those. I was the kid running door to door, which we don't see often today, but door to door, trying to beat out my neighbors, trying to beat out my brothers, trying to get that shoveling job. I weighed probably, I don't even know. I didn't weigh very much. I was a really, really thin girl. And I used to deliver papers. And that bag of papers used to be heavier than me. I still don't know how I did it.
Linda, I feel you. I had a paper route too, and I am the same thing. I was probably 90 pounds soaking wet.
I did too, but I rigged up my paper stuff on my bicycle.
See,
so
we were entrepreneurs even then.
You were a wise girl back then, And I think back, I think about all those times. I think about, going to high school. My parents, were able to put us into a Catholic school because back then it was a little different. They did it based on wages. So the, Catholic Church was able to, really support our family in giving me that education. But when it came to high school, the load was on my parents and they just could not afford it. So I, at that point, was going to have to leave my friends and go to a public school. And I was really upset about that. So
and she's gone. So you what?
I actually I took the city bus. Uh-huh. I took the city bus up to the school and cleaned all summer long to put money towards my tuition. So
and how old were you?
That school. I was 13 going into 14. Yeah.
Wow. When I was 12 years old, I was working before school. I would go back to Kimber Military School and College after school, serve the cadets dinner, and then I would even stay up until midnight running the snack shop. So I think there's something to what you have to say. I mean, I think that work ethics start very early in life.
Oh, yeah. I started my first official job at Dairy Queen before I was 16, and they paid me under the table.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. And what happens in that process, and I raised my son, my son never wanted for anything, right? He didn't. Yeah. But if he wanted sneakers, I mean, there were tough times, I'm telling you. I mean, there were times when I was making, good income, but I was deciding to feed him. I could only feed him at night. Right. And there were times when I slept on with a flashlight. I couldn't afford the electricity. There was a time when I looked out my window and they dumped my garbage at the end of my driveway and took my can. So even though but all of my money was going to the court system and protecting us. So, there were really tough times, but my son still had everything that he needed. But when he wanted that extra pair of sneakers, right? When he wanted that $100 pair of sneakers, or if he wanted a plane ticket to go somewhere or something to do with school, I have 50. And he would get so mad. He'd be like, well, Mom, so-and-so doesn't have to do that. Why do you make your... And,
we always figure it out. We always figure out if it's important enough, we can figure it out.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's one of the best lessons that we can give our kids is making them put skin in the game.
Yeah.
Yes. And that was the point I was going to get to, was that you become resourceful.
Yes.
You become so resourceful. And I am so grateful that my parents really didn't have it to give me. Really did, because I figured it out. And I see in my career today, like I've taken on roles in the last few years, and people say, like, weren't you scared? I was like, you know what? Yeah, I was a little scared, but every time I step into it, what I am confident on is I will figure it out.
Everything is
figure it out. I make it
figure-outable.
happen. Yeah, so I have so much confidence in that. Yeah, exactly. I have so much confidence in that. And that, to answer your question, is that is the greatest lesson. That is the greatest blessing, I should say, my parents gave me.
So what would you say to our listeners, someone who is just starting the journey, or somebody who started but they've hit that first roadblock, right? They thought it was going to be so easy, or they just launched their business and then COVID hit. What would you say? What piece of advice would you give them that maybe might pull them out or give them the courage to step out and to start to live that dream?
Well, there's two things. One is anytime that you step into something, recognize that there's going to be those bumps in the road. Once you acknowledge that, you prepare for it. When you try to avoid it, that's when it gets like kind of crazy, right? So I believe that when you acknowledge that there may be roadblocks, there probably will be, and you're going to have to pivot. You're going to have to make the decision to quit or to pivot, right? So when you're prepared for that, then it just eases you into it. You're like, okay, bring it on, right? Like your posture is so different. And and quite honestly, when the COVID did hit, I was doing consulting work. I had 3 speaking engagements in the next 45 days. One was a very large insurance company, and I was like, I was really counting on all these resources. And in just a few days, I lost most of my income. I lost like 80% of my income, which was a big amount of income, in the speaking events that I was counting on, right? And the revenue that was going to come from those as well.
Yes.
So I had my moment.
I feel you, Linda. Same thing happened to me. I had 4 paid speaking events. I was super excited. My business, I was getting ready to possibly hire somebody, and all of a sudden, I lost 100% of what I did because I'm a service. So I feel you.
Right, yeah.
You're right,
so
Linda.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Pivoting is so crucial. I mean,
Absolutely.
that is such a good point. But I also think that you have to have the right mindset, because if you don't have the right mindset, then you won't be prepared to pivot. You won't see the opportunity. You'll see it won't be an opportunity for you. It'll be a victim situation.
Right.
So
right.
I think we always have to go back to that mindset.
So how did you pivot, Linda? You just shared kind of what happened. So take us down that path. What did you do?
Well, it's funny because I'm sitting here at my desk, at my desk, and I remember sitting here saying, like, what in the world? Because you can kind of have that moment of feeling sorry for yourself. You're like, I overcame this, and now, I was doing well again. I got myself back up, and now this is hitting. We can kind of go into those pity parties for a moment, right? And it's just that making that decision that it is a moment. And I just literally had a conversation with myself, because if you don't self-talk yourself, we know that you have like 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. Many of them are negative. Many of them are there to protect you. But in reality, it's like you must take control over what you're saying to yourself, because you can determine whether you're going to have the power or not have the power, be the victim or be the victor. And in this decision, I just said, okay, this really stinks right now. This really, really stinks. But what if this is happening for you, Linda?
Yes.
Linda, like what if this is happening for you? And what happened was I made a decision that some of the things that I said, I will do that next quarter, or I will get to that. But the reality is those things were a little bit scarier. So I put them off. I faced them, and I went forward. And it's amazing what has happened over these 8 to 9 weeks. Like, I will still go back to the speaking on the stages, and I believe those 3 events will be rescheduled. Actually, one is already rescheduled. But the thing is that I have opened up a whole nother world. I'm able to service and serve and love and give to a whole new audience So it's amazing what has happened over this period of time. So again, it does come back to mindset. It's fueling that, and that must be done every single day, because had I not make it, why am I tongue tied? Had I not made that investment into myself each and every day, when things hit the fan, if you will, I wouldn't be prepared.
Right.
And that's why it's important to not do it when things get tough. It's doing it consistently and fueling your mind every single day.
Excellent point.
I have one. I want to interject here because I've got one kind of tip for the listeners, that when things do get tough or something happens to you that, historically you might go, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world, or the sky is falling, or whatever your normal reaction is, change your verbiage. And instead of saying that, go, that's a little inconvenient. How can I turn this around?
Right.
And if you change your verbiage and you use something like, that's, didn't expect that. That came out of left hand, or whatever. If you change your verbiage, then the story changes and the way that you react to it will change. The outcome changes. So
absolutely.
The energy around it changes. You go from feeling lost to looking at it as, okay, for the first time, I can slow down and I can breathe and I can start to work on these bigger, scarier projects, which is exactly what it sounds like you did.
Yeah. I did. I absolutely did. So, and like I said, I'm not sitting here saying I didn't have my moment, because you're like, well, what am I going to do? And it just really becomes a decision. Right. You have a decision to make, whether we allow the outside to control how we think and how we feel and our emotions for that day, or we do what you said, change our verbiage and work from a place of power. There's no power.
Everything's a choice. That's one of the things we really want to get through to our listeners is everything is a choice and how you handle it. No matter what is going on, you still have power.
And
that's right.
It's okay to make a decision and make it the wrong decision. As long as you make a decision and, just adjust it down the road if you need to.
Mm-hmm. It's better than standing still, for sure.
So next question. You went through the COVID and you had your moment, right? You talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
So once you got your mindset back into a good state of mind, did you have a sense of excitement about what was to come?
I did, especially when you have that first win, right?
Yes.
So, and it's not to say I just had my moment. Through adversity, you might have your moment and then feel really strong later in the day or the next day, and then all of a sudden it comes back, that cloud comes over, and it's the same, you go through the same process, and you work your way through using that internal dialogue, and making those choices, and like you said, we didn't have, our power is not in getting rid of the COVID, right? That's not our power. Our power is in how we respond to it. I personally have had very little fear outside of financial fear through this whole process. But so I've had my moments, but, it's been exciting because, like I said, things are expanding. And I believe that when we are completely out of this, we'll all have, I pray we all rebound from it. But in the meantime, I've been just truly blessed to have some great opportunities.
That's very powerful. So I have one last question for you. I want to know what challenge you would personally give our listeners. I want you to give them some small little step that they can take or one thing that that you have done that they can do. If you can quickly give them that challenge for me.
what comes to mind and has been such an impact on my personal life and my professional life and how I feel every day, how I show up every day, is creating a space of time every single morning for myself. So I've created this process where I read the Bible, I journal. In my journal, I write down 4 things. The first 3 are, what are my 3 focuses for the day? What are 3 focuses? Not necessarily to do, because one of those focuses might have a few to-dos under it. But what are my 3 things that I'm going to focus on that day? The 4th thing is bless someone today. And I pray about that God brings somebody to me that I'm able to bless, because I believe it's like a boomerang, right? When you can bless someone else, it comes back, it fills your heart, that you've made an imprint for that day. The other thing that I do is I sit and I write down 5 things I'm grateful for. And I take it a step further. After I write those things down, I close my eyes and I give thanks and I vision each one of those. Because kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. When we're in adversity, before we pivot, right? We're in adversity. We're focused on that adversity, but that might only be 20% of what's happening in our life. But we can't see the 80% because we're focused on the 20. When you're in a state of gratitude, you show up focusing on the 80. You show up, and that's where your power is. So, and then I read personal development. I always read at least 10 pages of a great personal development book, and I do this every single morning. I take charge and responsibility for how I show up that day. And that's what I choose
excellent.
to do.
That is so excellent. Thank you, Linda.
So
yeah, it's really powerful. It's really, really powerful time. And I probably spend about 45 minutes to an hour sometimes, but you don't even have to spend that much time. And some people might be saying, your listeners might be saying, I don't have time. And trust me, I've had a lot of clients tell me that. They don't have time. They don't
wake
have
up
time.
earlier.
5 a.m. is not that hard.
Right. And the thing is like I created a process where they can do it in 30 minutes, and they come back and they're like, this is a life changer for me, Linda. This is a life changer. And it's just like everything that we tell ourselves and we tell others 2 things when we don't want to do it, whether it's uncomfortable or fearful or whatever the issue is. It's I don't have the time and I don't have the money. I wish I could, but I don't have the time. I wish I could, but I don't have the money. And that's really something that we need to look at with COVID, because we've had a lot of time.
Right.
And really, it's putting value on your time in living now. Now, even through COVID, there's living. There's living to be had, So, I encourage everyone, my challenge to all of the listeners is to create a morning process where it includes a daily focus, it includes gratitude, it includes feeding your mind with great words, whether it's from the Bible or a personal development book, or better yet, both. So,
one last question. I know we only have a few more minutes with you. Thank you again so much for your time. We truly appreciate it. But one last question. If you could go back to the younger Linda and give one piece of advice, what would that be?
Wow, that's a really fun question. I would have told my 21-year-old self to trust yourself. Trust yourself. So I made a decision to marry, and at that point, something in me was telling me that this wasn't the best decision for me, and I chose to listen to the advice of others when I should have really, at that time, like I did in the court years, trusted myself more.
And if anyone wants to find you, how can they find you?
I'm on all social media platforms under Linda Ann Barber. You can email me at linda@lindaannbarber as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time. We truly appreciate it. And
do,
I can't wait
Linda.
to talk to you later this week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You're
Have a great evening.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Take care. She's one of my favorites.
Yeah, powerful lady. powerful lady.
She is. And one of the reasons that she's one of my favorites is because, well, first of all, we have a lot in common.
You do.
But she is always positive.
Yeah.
I have not had one moment with her that she didn't see the bright side of something, or she couldn't focus only on the positive.
Well, and you have to stop and think about the journey that she shared with us, Shannon. There was a lot of terror and outside forces coming in at her, and she didn't let those stop her from her purpose. And because of that, she's helping to change lives now. And so it's really important, I think, for our listeners to know that no matter what the situation is, and obviously we don't know what you're all going through, but there's always that opportunity to make a choice. And what that does is it gives you back your power.
Yeah.
And I love how she talks about the routines, because you and I are religious about that. And she's right. That is a game changer.
It really is. It really is. So many great points made during this episode. I just want to kind of recap a few.
Sounds good.
So I loved it that she started with believing in yourself.
It's the first step.
So important. And if you don't believe, it won't happen. If you believe, whatever you believe in yourself will come true. So if you believe you can't do something, you won't be able to.
Yeah, and one of the steps that I have for you, because I used to say I can't a lot. And what I have realized is that, or I'm not good at this a lot. And what I realized is I'm not good at it now. And so what I say instead now is, well, I'm working on getting better at that. And that language right there changes it.
It does. It does. And I love quotes. One quote that came to mind while you were talking was, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Exactly.
Either way, you're right. The next thing was the process. She said that she had a process around her financial, her physical, and her health. It's very important to be balanced during this time, because you don't want to. I personally made the mistake of jumping in so much into the personal development that I didn't have balance, and my marriage suffered from it. So you want to make sure that you have a very good balance and you take care of your body. She took small steps. That's huge. You don't have to eat the whole apple in one bite, right?
You're going to choke.
Just take a little bite at a time. And you'll get there.
You're going to choke if you try to eat the whole thing in one bite.
She kept going back to routines. Routines are vital to success. And one thing that I loved that she pointed out was that she said her parents did the best that they could. The first step, I believe the first step in any success is when you stop blaming other factors on the success that you've had. You stop blaming the way you were grown up. You stop blaming, the education that you got. Whatever it is that the listeners might be blaming, stop doing it. Because as long as you have something to blame besides yourself, you will never change your life. So I love that she said her parents did the best that they could. And that is so true, because they did the best that they could with the tools and resources that they had. She also talked about great work ethics, and figuring it out is a blessing in disguise. That helps make you stronger. She said, recognize there will be bumps in the road. It's not going to be easy. Tony Robbins always says, see things as they are, but not worse than they are. And be prepared to pivot. When you can recognize a weak area, you can make it stronger, as long as you're willing to recognize it. Don't forget, you always have a choice. And I love her challenge.
That was an excellent challenge. And she gave you some really great, easy steps. And one of the things that I think she did in her beginning of the journey that was so important is she sat down and she wrote it down. She wrote out, she said, okay, enough is enough. I deserve better.
Yes.
And she wrote out what better looks like. And this was exactly what we suggested for you in our last episode. If you missed it, I highly suggest you go take a listen, because it is the start of knowing where you're going. It's your roadmap to your life where you're making the choices and the decisions.
And you don't want to, please don't forget, we really, really encourage you, don't try to take notes, and I want you to take notes, but don't take notes and say, oh, if I don't do every single thing on here, I'm going to fail. That's not true. Maybe you don't need all the steps that someone else took. Maybe you don't need it right now. Those notes will come in later when you get past a couple of these steps and you're pretty confident in those steps, and now you want to move on to the next thing. Her advice to her younger self was priceless.
Absolutely.
Trust yourself. And, I think that this next thing that you hear is going to be very common out of both Rachel, myself, and pretty much every single guest who comes on and talks. Don't listen to what anyone else says about your situation. Don't allow someone else to put limits on you.
Or, make you a victim, because like Linda said, she says victim and victor. I like to say victim and survivor, because sometimes we're in a situation where when we're a child, something may happen that we didn't have a choice. But if you continue to let that be the one thing that stops you, you've made yourself the victim. Be the survivor and move on to that victory you deserve.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Jump, Pivot, and Roll. If you liked what you heard, please go out, share it out. There might be somebody out there that just needs your recommendation for this and that will pick up a nugget that will change their life completely. Think of how happy that would make you. So please like, share, comment. Let us know what you like, what you want to hear more of. And make sure you subscribe. Until next time, have an amazing week.
Bye-bye, guys.